Here's how Warren Buffett made his billions. Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha. Perhaps you know him as one of the top 5 richest people on Earth. But have you ever wondered how exactly he got so wealthy? In this video, we'll take a look at how Warren Buffett made his multi-billion-dollar fortune, and how you might be able to apply Buffett's way of thinking to do the same. Warren Edward Buffett was born in 1930 in Omaha, Nebraska, to Howard and Layla Stahl Buffett. He was the middle of 3 children with an older and a younger sister, Doris and Birdie, respectively. He was born 1 year into the Great Depression, and his father lost his job as a sock salesman 1 year after Warren was born. With what savings he had, Warren's father, Howard Buffett, started an investment company called Buffett, Falk & Company and worked through the Great Depression. As a child, Warren Buffett was interested in numbers and money. Described as quiet and inquisitive, he loved to play statistical games, like betting which marble would roll from one end of the bathtub to the other the fastest. He was competitive from an early age and skipped several grades as a child. Always an avid reader, he would spend time at his father's office reading his father's investment books. Rumor has it that Buffett still spends up to 80% of his day reading now, preferring a low-tech lifestyle. Because of the nature of his business, Warren's father went back and forth to New York occasionally. On one particularly fortuitous trip to New York, Warren joined him and they had lunch with a Dutchman named At Mole, who was a member of the New York Stock Exchange. Seeing Mole get to choose which tobacco leaves went into his cigar before it was rolled cemented Warren's interest in the market. The young Warren Buffett also showed early signs of an entrepreneurial spirit. He regularly started his own small businesses to supplement his nickel-a-week allowance. Running a newspaper route where, as well as newspapers, he sold magazine subscriptions, gum, Coca-Cola, in his words, you name it. He bought his first stock at age 11 and filed taxes for the first time when he was 13. He credits this enterprising spirit and many of his ethical values to his father, saying that his father believed very much in having an inner scorecard and to never worry about what other people are thinking about you. If you know why you're doing what you're doing, that's good enough. His father instilled in Warren the belief that all lives have equal value. 2 things that have probably been influential both in the family's history of charitable giving and Warren's tendency to march to the beat of his own, very successful drum. In 1942, when Warren was 12, his father was elected to Congress, and the family moved to Washington, D.C. Warren's father, Howard, became ultimately a 4-term congressman for Nevada. While still in high school in D.C., Warren and a friend founded his first slightly more serious business. They bought a used coin-operated pinball machine and installed it at a local barbershop, splitting the coins collected with the shop. It was a success, and they used the funds from the first machine to buy a few more and spread the machines out across a few local barbershops. The idea may not have been what made him his first million, but it was a success, and he and the friend ultimately sold the business, which they started with the $25 it took to purchase their first pinball machine, for over $1,000. After high school, Warren was reluctant to go to college, wanting instead to simply go out into the business world. His father, however, insisted, so Warren entered the prestigious Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania at the age of 17. He spent 2 years at UPenn, then transferred to the University of Nebraska and graduated after his 3rd year. After graduation, he applied to Harvard Business School and was rejected, something he says was one of the best things that ever happened to him. It's led him to find out that economists Benjamin Graham and David Dodd, who created the philosophy of value investing, were teaching at Columbia Business School in New York. He wrote to them and was admitted instead to Columbia. Graham in particular served as a mentor to Warren. The rules of investing he taught him as Warren describes them. Rule number 1, never lose money. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. But in truth, the biggest principle in value investing is that when you pay less for something than what it's worth, you'll eventually make money. Value will, in the end, prove out. Value investing basically espouses buying a stock when it is worth more than its price in the market. It involves intensely scrutinizing the company's financials and assets. If the market price is lower than what you determine a share in the company to be objectively worth, you buy. Warren Buffett has been a proponent of value investing throughout his life, and it seems to have worked for him. Buffett graduated business school in 1951 and moved to Omaha to sell securities for his father's brokerage firm, Buffett, Falk & Company. He worked there for 3 years and, while working there, met his first love, Susie Thompson. Warren also in this time took his first public speaking class. His fear of public speaking was becoming so terrible that he thought he had to cure it then or he'd never get over it. He says that class changed the trajectory of his life. For one thing, it gave him the courage he needed to propose to Susie. In 1952, Warren married Susie Thompson and they had their first child, a daughter named Susan Alice, about a year later. In 1954, Benjamin Graham offered Warren a job as a securities analyst, and the family moved to New York for 2 years. In 1956, they returned to Omaha, and Warren Buffett formed a partnership, his first partnership with some family members to help them manage their money. This was Buffett Partnership Ltd., and for 6 years he functioned as a one-man band, doing everything from receiving deliveries to filing tax returns for all 11 members of the partnership. The first partnership started with a little over $100,000. By the time he moved his office in 1962, his partnerships had over $7 million in investments, a not insignificant portion of which was profits made from his business dealings. He was essentially buying cheap stocks below value that would then be bought back close to their true value, making relatively small amounts of money but doing it many, many times. Buffett is well known for his personal frugality and avoidance of the flashy lifestyle associated with billionaires, continuing to work out of the same office and live in the same house in Omaha as he did before he made his money. He often stops at the McDonald's between his house and his office for breakfast on the way to work and describes his system of choosing what to order a matter of only about $1 from most to least expensive option. Pittance for a man worth over $80 billion, based on how he thinks the market is doing for the day. Warren and his wife had their 3 children. The kids, they say, had a normal life and a dad who was present, consistent, and not at all a multi-billionaire, or even seemingly a millionaire, though he did become one in 1962 at the age of 32. Susie did most of the work at home. She was also politically influential on Warren during this time period. Warren was the son of a Republican congressman, while she was a Democrat and active in the civil rights movement. Susie brought him along to see Martin Luther King's famous "I Have a Dream" speech. Though Warren and Susie separated in the 70s, their political discourse seems to have had a lasting effect. Today, Warren is known to hold liberal viewpoints, having supported Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton in their respective presidential elections and favoring redistribution of wealth away from the ultra-rich like himself and back to the American people and economy. In 1962, Warren Buffett bought his first shares in the then-failing textile business Berkshire Hathaway. He bought their stock expecting to resell it fairly shortly at a modest profit. The then management ultimately did make an offer to tender their stock, and Buffett named his price, $11.50 a stock. They agreed. When the offer arrived in writing a few months later, they had lowered the offer to $11.37.5 per stock, an eighth of a dollar less and a double crossing. This made Warren angry, so rather than selling, he purchased additional stock. By May of 1965, his partnerships, by then combined into one, had enough stock to control the company, and they fired the existing management that had tried to make the bad deal. Looking back, Warren and his longtime friend and business partner Charlie Munger admit that reacting that way to being cheated by Berkshire Hathaway's then chairman may not have been the best business move. Buffett notes that the bad offer happened to come just 5 days after his father had passed away. He let emotion come into his investments, which is generally frowned upon. But given that through his managing of Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett became for a time the richest man on earth, it seems that his mistake may have been, for him, if not for Berkshire Hathaway's former management, a happy one. After taking over Berkshire Hathaway, things began to move a bit faster. Buffett moved the company away from textiles and ultimately closed all of the company's remaining factories, which had been failing at the time he first purchased the stocks. In remodeling the company, he first invested its money in a department store and the Washington Post, and in 1979 they began to acquire stock in ABC. In 1985, Buffett, by then a multimillionaire, helped finance the purchase of ABC by Capital Cities in exchange for a 25% stake in the combined company. And in 1988, Berkshire began buying stock in Coca-Cola, in what would become one of their most lucrative investments. Charlie Munger, today the vice chairman of Berkshire Hathaway, is worth mentioning for a variety of reasons in the story of Warren Buffett. The two met in 1959, and Munger became a partner at Berkshire in 1978. Munger had been credited with a slight edit to Buffett's personal emphasis on value investing. Buffett learned both through his early work in those first partnerships and through Munger's guidance that, to quote Buffett himself, he moved him toward looking for wonderful companies for fair prices, rather than fair companies at wonderful prices. He credits that philosophy with enabling Berkshire's incredible ability to scale. On May 29, 1990, Berkshire Hathaway began selling Class A shares. The market closed that day at $7,175 a share, making Buffett officially a billionaire. He was 60. By the age of 66, he was worth $17 billion thanks to his thoughtful investing. Today, Berkshire Hathaway is worth around $300,000. Berkshire Hathaway owns Geico, Duracell, and Dairy Queen, among other major brands. The Forbes 2019 billionaires list had him at number 3, with a net worth of $82.5 billion, and that's after he gave away over $35 billion to charity. Which brings us to why his charitable spirit is so important in talking about Buffett's billions. Along with Bill Gates and Mark Zuckerberg, he's signed a pledge committing to donate at least 50% of his wealth to charitable causes. In fact, Warren's personally pledged to give away as much as 99% of his fortune. He has said that he will leave his family, to paraphrase, enough inheritance that they feel like they can do anything, but not so much that they can feel like doing nothing. So how did he make his billions? In short, Warren Buffett took a keen interest in investing from day one. He held on to his moral values and a sense of frugality instilled in him by his family, spouse, and business partners, as well as a childhood lived through the Great Depression. He focused on compounding his wealth. When he got money, rather than spending it, he invested it. He invested smartly in companies whose stock he could see, by careful examination of their assets and financial records, were worth empirically more than their price, and he made a few mistakes along the way. So, with a little frugality, a lot of vigilance, and a healthy dose of ambition, maybe you too could become one of the richest people in the world.